Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, Ms. T1. At the hearing this afternoon, Council will consider the appointment of Bonnie T1. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
It's a lot easier if you forget the U's there and just say T-Win.
T1, okay, thank you. Of Bonnie T1 as Director of Public Works, a new position under the Charter. The Director of Public Works is an Article 5 appointee, meaning that the appointment is subject to confirmation by Council. According to the Charter, all of the Ohio Revised Code's powers of the county engineer and county sanitary engineer are to be exercised and carried out by and at the direction of the Director of Public Works. The Director of Public Works may assume additional responsibilities and duties only by ordinance. And we'll probably be asking you about that. We have been advised that the Executive Office has assigned the responsibility of the Central Service Department to the Public Works. Should Council agree to this structure, we will have to adopt an ordinance to that effect. In addition, the Charter requires that if the Director of Public Works is not a professional engineer and a registered surveyor licensed by the state of Ohio, the Director must employ one or more deputies or assistants who together or separately possess both of those qualifications. The hearings will proceed as follows. First, we will offer time for public comment for those who have signed in. Public comment is limited to 2 minutes. The nominee will be offered an opportunity to address his or her qualifications for seeking the position, and outlooks and plans regarding the office. Council members will be offered an opportunity to ask questions of the nominee. We will do so in rounds, so allowing each council member to ask 3 questions on the first round, and then we'll go around for a second round of questioning. Once all questions have been answered, and assuming that council is ready, we will entertain a motion to recommend that council consent or not consent to the nomination. Assuming a motion to recommend consent or no consent has been made, council will then be voting on the official notification or the official recommendation at our regular meeting. We have been officially notified by Mr. Fitzgerald of Ms. T1's appointment, and our time is running for our 30 days for appointment. Let the record reflect that, well, do you want to call the roll then, or won't we call the roll before we start?
Mr. Greenspan?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Present.
Mr. Brady?
Present.
Mr. Germana? Present. Mr. Gallagher? Here. Mr. Schron?
Not here. He was here this morning.
Ms. Conwell?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Rogers? Here. Ms. Simon? Here.
All right, we have a quorum present. I will note for the record that I have received a copy of Ms. T1's license crediting her as a professional engineer, and her license will be expiring 12/31/11, so she is qualified for this position as it relates to being an engineer. All right. Do we have any public comment? Is there anyone here from the public that would like to make any statements?
Madam President, no one has signed in to speak.
Okay. If you'd like to make an opening statement, we'll proceed.
I'm glad my mom didn't show up.
Okay.
I'm going to start out on a really bad foot. I'm going to tell you that I was born in Pittsburgh and I am a Steelers fan, but
you can just leave now.
But it won't get better from this point on. I went to Brunswick High School, to Mr. Gallagher's dismay. Yeah, I know, but increments, I'm getting better. I went to the University of Akron. I graduated in December of 1985 with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. I was in the co-op program. I'm proud to say that I was able to pay for my own college. My parents helped a little bit, but the majority of it was paid for by myself through the co-op program that they offer at Akron U. I started working right out of college with ODOT. I worked there for 13 years. My first 2 years was spent in the engineering and training program. Basically what that is a certified program at ODOT where you go from one department to another. You basically learn what all the departments do. Worked in the district, also worked in central office, worked out in the field, so I learned a lot. It was a good experience. And that experience was actually something that when I came back to ODOT, I made it a 5-year program for all the entry-level engineers that came to District 12. From that, after 2 years of being in, a year and a half, 2 years being in the training program, I was one of the assistant district bridge engineers. I worked on detailed maintenance bridge plans. I also acted as the construction liaison between any bridge projects that were being built and any projects that they were having problems with out in construction. I was the person that would go in there, figure out what the problem was, and come up with the solution with the help of some other engineers, and then put all the paperwork together to make things right. From that, in 97, I was promoted to the roadway services manager. That consisted of the divisions of traffic, bridge maintenance, and bridge inspection, the district garage, right-of-way permits, and incident management. One of the things is, in my 25 years of experience, I always try to look back and what did I learn from each of the experiences that I had, the different jobs that I had. With the working as the bridge engineer, one of the things that I learned is, there's not enough details in the plans. Everything needs to be in the documents, and you have to be as specific as possible in the plans because there's always somebody looking to find that little opening. So that's what I took away from that position. As the roadway services manager, what I learned from there is that's the first opportunity that I really had to manage a staff of people. I had about 40 people that I managed, and from that, I took away that how important it was to set goals and keep employees accountable. The first time when you manage people, you think it's going to be great, but then when you have to hold people accountable and set goals for them, it's very important that you're very specific on the goals and that those goals are measurable. In 1999, I decided that I wanted to try my hand at the private sector. So I worked with a company called Michael Benz and Associates. It's a small engineering firm. They did a lot of municipality work. One of the projects that I worked on was the reconstruction of Euclid Avenue. It was about a $6 million project in East Cleveland, basically ripping the roadway up and replacing it. I helped the community find the $6 million through various funding sources. That's when I really became familiar with other forms of government, working with the county, working with cities, and kind of what their heartaches are. In 2001, I was hired by Wade Trim. It's a larger consulting firm. Wade Trim is a company based out of Michigan. They had one employee in Cleveland that did sewer modeling for the regional sewer district. Wade Trim wanted to open up a office in Cleveland. They wanted to grow that office. They hired me to grow their transportation group in Ohio. And then shortly after my hire, they acquired Western Reserve Engineering. That was a local firm in Cuyahoga County. They did a lot of municipal engineering for the local communities, did some work for the county agencies as well. So while I was with Wade Trim, there were a lot of local projects that I worked on as project manager. In Garfield Heights, I worked on the East 31st Broadway widening, the transportation in Antonucci Boulevard resurfacing. In Maple Heights, my project was the Northfield Road widening project where they took it from 4 lanes to 5 lanes. And actually, that's in Maple Heights and Bedford Heights. The corp line is right down the middle. Worked in Broadview Heights on the 82 widening by Broadview Road that extended to 77. And then in Strongsville, the 82 widening by the Metro Parks in Brooklyn Heights. the Lancaster Road Bridge that was reconstructed a few years ago, that was a project that I worked very closely with Brooklyn Heights, trying to find the funding. They had a culvert there that collapsed basically because of the storms that were a side effect of Katrina. They came up to this area, and we had a culvert that completely collapsed. And I was out there in my boots, and when the culvert looked like a piece of aluminum foil, basically. And we worked with FEMA, trying to get funding, work with other funding sources so that the village could, would only have a minimal impact into their budget. So that project was the largest capital project that the village of Brooklyn Heights ever had. And we're glad to say that we were able to find enough funding for them that their contribution was very minimal. So I worked for Weight Trim for 5 years. Probably the thing that I took away from Weight Trim was customer service. That's really where I found that, the people that I worked with, were good resources for me as far as, getting other sources of work. Many of those people I'm friends with still today, because once you're in the business, you always stay in the business, and, you make a lot of good friends. Then I decided that I was going to try my hand at opening my own firm. So one of the problems that I had is I wanted to do some design work. But while I was working for Weight Trim, they also did design work. I found out very quickly that I needed to work for somebody else because the business I wanted to be in wasn't going to take off, and I wouldn't be able to support myself and my daughter. So I had to work part-time, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to do this. And the concern I had was a conflict of interest, that if I was working for a design firm and I had my own design firm, how I was going to do that. The opportunity came about where I was able to work in construction administration, which is another part of civil engineering. The conflict was gone because I was working in a whole nother industry as opposed to the design. So I did a little bit of design work on my own. But the majority of what I was doing was working on the Euclid corridor project. I was an employee of QCI, who was a subconsultant to the Washington Group, and the Washington Group was the construction administrators for the $200 million Euclid corridor project. I was the resident engineer on that project. My section that I worked on was right here in downtown. I was in, work boots and jeans every day, arguing with the contractor, trying to solve problems, making sure that we, were coordinating all the utility work and all the other subcontractors. And my job was to ensure that the quality and the accuracy to the contractor's payment was accurate. What I took away from that was he who has the most documentation wins. Because when you're face-to-face with the contractor and you're deciding, did you put in, 100 feet of storm or 101 feet of storm pipe, you got to make sure that you have all the documentation. So it's really important to be accurate, to be very specific, to have a lot of backup documentation so that everything, the quality and the accuracy is there. In 2007, I was lucky enough to be appointed by Governor Strickland as the District 12 Deputy Director, and that's when the fun began. 2 months into my appointment, I got an anonymous call from a person who claimed that there was an inappropriate contracting being awarded in District 12. Initially, we worked with our local central office investigators. We did some investigation, and they decided that they were going to turn it over to the newly formed State Inspector General. After about 1.5 years of working with the Inspector General in District 12, there were 7 ODOT District 12 employees who were removed, 5 of which will spend time in prison, pled guilty, spend time in prison, and they'll be paying restitution. And there were numerous vendors that were found guilty will spend time in jail and will pay restitution. Basically, what I took away from that is documentation. You have to make sure that there's a checks and balances with everything. Because of that investigation, there were hundreds of ODOT employees that were trained, retrained on the new purchasing process that went through. You always have to look at who's doing what and make sure that if an investigation occurs that you have an answer or documentation to back up what you're doing. So it was an interesting experience. I learned a lot from it. I don't want to go through it again, but it made me a little smarter. I'm a little bit more in tune to the things that could go wrong. The Inspector General, for the 4 years that I was there, he did several other investigations, not necessarily in my district, but it gives me an insight to when somebody goes in and investigates what you're doing. So that's kind of how I look. My perspective on things is I look at what we're doing, our processes, from the Inspector General's point of view. So that's one of the things that I want to bring to the county, is that perspective, and make sure that we're not embarrassed by anything that's going on, that we can make corrections, and hopefully we can make corrections before it gets to investigation. But we do have to look at investigations as an opportunity for improvement. During my time with Business and Human with ODOT, I acted as the Business and Human Resource Administrator. I worked a lot with personnel issues and with the labor agreements, and it was a learning experience as far as personnel. When you're an engineer and you're used to working with numbers, now all of a sudden you got to work with people and labor agreements. It's a whole different issue, but I learned a lot there. Some of the other things that I did during my career, particularly with ODOT, I sat on the NOACA board for ODOT. I also represented the director on the Ohio Turnpike Commission. I am the president of the local chapter of the American Society of Highway Engineers. I was the 2010 chairperson for the subcommittees for the Ohio Transportation Engineers Conference, also known as OTEC. That's a conference that's held every year in Columbus that draws about 2,500 engineers, and I was chairman of the subcommittee. This year I have the honor of being the chairman of the whole conference. It's a big conference, and it's something that we use to get our continuing credit hours for our professional license. Some of the goals that I have to bring to the county is, first of all, the safety of all of our employees. I want to make sure that our employees can come to work every day, that they stay safe. Not having an employee on workers' comp, it costs us money, and they can't be productive when they're sitting at home with an injury. So I have a very specific goal of improving our safety numbers. I want to review all of our processes. Everything we do, we need to look at how we can do it better, cheaper, and faster. That's going to be my motto. Every time I talk to an employee, how can we do it better, cheaper, and faster? Even the little things. Even if somebody thinks this is as good as it can get, I don't believe that, because there's always a way to do it better, especially with technology and whatnot. So that will be my motto: better, cheaper, faster. How are we going to prove that we're doing it better? Third-party audits, if you want to say, quality assurance reviews. I'd like to bring in independent third party, whether it's bringing in another county agency, whether it's bringing in the private sector, whether it's bringing in another department from the county to actually look at the process of what we're doing, seeing how we're doing it. Do we have good practices that we need to share with other people? Are we failing in some areas? Are we not meeting what we're supposed to be doing with our procedures and processes? I look at those not as a gotcha, but as how can we improve? Do we need to improve? We'll have action items. And by sharing this with the public, I think this gives more transparency to what we're doing in county government, that we have a process where the process is being reviewed, and we're going to make those documents public. Good things, bad things, that all needs to be out there. I think that will help with the transparency. Monitoring our cost in the sanitary department, in the engineering department, and also in central services. There's customary standards that we can grade ourselves on. So I'd like to make sure, that what we're doing, we're billing towards the job to make sure that all of our documentation is accurate. And then at that point, I'd like to make sure that, do the analysis to find out how much it cost us to put a door in. You guys are all living around the construction on the 4th floor. How much does it cost our central services to install a door? And compare that price. There's some things that, and I did this at ODOT. We went through it at ODOT, our maintenance crews. When I got there, we did $2 million worth of guardrail repairs, the ding and dent, what we call ding and dent. When in the wintertime somebody slides around, they hit the guardrail, they don't necessarily take the whole line out, but they might just ding it, but we have to fix it. They used to contract that work out. When I came in, first of all, we couldn't afford to pay contractors anymore to do that. I said, that's work that we should be doing ourselves. We can salvage some of the guardrails from some of the old construction projects, bring it back to our yards. We can get our maintenance crews to work up a system. We worked with the union that we have, and we sat down, how can we efficiently get all this work done? And when I left, we were doing $0 of contract work in guardrail ding and dent. We were doing it all with our own crews. Now, I call that a success story. And the guys enjoyed it too. I mean, they didn't like to see their work being farmed out. They wanted to do the work themselves. So we started doing that with all the things that we did, all the works, whether it's a culvert replacement, guardrail replacement. We started looking at the cost of everything we do. Now, there's some things that we can do cheaper. But there were also things that were more expensive, that the contractors, because they have specialty equipment or whatnot. But if you look at all those and you list all those items and you look at our cost versus a contractor's cost, you can actually draw a line. This is what we should be doing. This is what contractors should be doing. Because I'm an engineer, very analytical, everything can come down to numbers. And that's how we determined what we were going to contract out and what we were going to do in-house. So cheaper. The goal is to always do it cheaper. One of the recommendations from the transition team is to be competitive, to actually bid the public work with the private work. Now, we have to be careful with that a little bit with the unions we have and make sure that we're able to do that. But I think that's something we should pursue. Basically, because we're all competitive, to some extent. I'm really competitive, so because I play a lot of sports. But make it a challenge for the guys, whether it's in the sanitary engineers department or the bridge maintenance guys or central services. We're going to bid you guys against the private sector and see how good you are. There's been some successes in some other cities. I like the idea, and I think that's something that we should pursue. Now, faster, that kind of goes hand in hand with being competitive. They always say time is money, particularly with construction projects. Time is money. If you delay a contractor because of a utility being in the way, it costs money. One of the things with our capital programs is I really think we need to challenge the contractors and tighten up those completion schedules because, for example, like a road construction project, it's inconvenient to a lot of people and costs people money. So I think we should look at the opportunity of incentive disincentives on projects where, they're in busy neighborhoods so that we can get those projects done quicker and get them out of the way. So I think that we can talk specifically about some of the specific goals in the transition, but I'm going to leave some time for you guys if you want to ask some questions.
Thank you very much. I believe Mr. Gallagher wants to start with some questions.
Welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you.
I spent a lot of time last night trying to figure out how I was going to approach my time with you. And I did give you kind of a heads up as where I was looking Monday. And I think it's important for you to understand that those that came before you don't necessarily aren't necessarily an indicator of who you are or what you are or your department. Same with us. We've learned that even though we haven't done anything yet, I don't think people are watching, and we're going to be painted with that broad brush. In particularly, I was disappointed with the engineer's office on a personal level because your predecessor was my city engineer, and I had to sit back and watch as a genuinely decent human being and a very good engineer destroyed his own reputation and the reputation of the engineer's office, which was a body of professionals that was always off to the side and very rarely in the public's view. And when they were, it was a good thing because roads were getting done and sewers were getting done. So I don't want you to think that anything that maybe that we're thinking is a reflection of you, but maybe we want to bring things to your attention that we think would benefit you and us going forward. I've reviewed all your information, and other than the Pittsburgh Brunswick thing, I think we can move on from there. And I asked for a list of the engineer and sanitary engineers employees and their pay, and a lot of the names I anticipated to see are no longer there. So I would imagine that the cleansing has begun. I would suggest perusing it that the cleansing is not finished, as the cleansing is not finished with the auditor or the board of revisions or the sheriff's department or any other area of the county that had problems, because this past scandal has put us all on notice. But you were mentioning that as far as going through the personnel and looking from top to bottom, would you agree that not only all the people working for the engineer's office should be reviewed, but their salaries should be reviewed? And this probably goes to the executive actually through you, that I do see some strange amounts for some interesting jobs here that I think maybe could be pared down. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. Again, with the unions, I mean, you're at the mercy of the unions as far as pay scales go, in particularly the trades. The experience that we had at ODOT, there's a lot of correlation, because I honestly believe that there's a lot of good, hardworking public servants that want to do the right thing. And it's unfortunate that it's a few bad eggs that ruin it for everybody else. I'm sensitive to the good hard workers, and I want to make sure that I take the time and really give everybody a fair opportunity as to who's doing the right thing and who's not. And maybe if you weren't doing anything, maybe now's the time to start. That's why I honestly believe it's very important that you set very specific goals that you can measure for everybody. And it starts at the top, where Mr. Fitzgerald sets goals for me. I take my goals and I cascade them down to the appropriate departments. And they're very specific, measurable goals. Now, you'll either meet your goals or you won't. If you don't, let's find out why. Do you need help? Do you need training? Give everybody the opportunity. My experience at ODOT is there's some people that aren't willing to step up, and when they have a sheet of paper that has very specific measurable goals, and they figure out that there's no way that they have the capability to do that, they start counting the number of years before they can retire. And I've actually had a lot of people that I call successful retirees that, left because they realized that, they were actually going to have to start stepping up and working. So to answer your question, yes, I'm going to review everybody. I have 600 employees. If I know everybody's name when I leave here, I'll be happy. But the thing that we have to stress is that supervisors and managers need to be accountable for their employees, and I think that's one of the things that failed at ODOT, and one of the things that failed in this situation. That the manager should be held accountable for what's going on underneath them. So you can't just say that I didn't know about it. And you need to know about it. And I myself, I think I have a good feel for. They call it EQ, and that I know when something's not right, when somebody's not doing something right, and it's like I wouldn't think twice about having our inspector investigate somebody, and if I was uncomfortable with it and our inspector came back and said, didn't find anything, he's clean, good. That makes me happy because now I can sleep at night. But I'm sure there's a lot of people that have an uncomfortable feeling, and they're just as guilty because they didn't say anything. So we need to change the mentality that if something's not quite right, let's look at it a little further and find out what's not right about it.
And I think it's a good point that you make, that there are just all kinds of very good employees in this county that have been painted with that broad brush of negativity, basically, being brought into all of this, and we have to all get through that together, and hopefully we will. I think at this point I'd let my colleagues finish up.
Mr. Greenspan.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for coming today. And you're coming in, unlike our previous interview where Sheriff Reed has been on the job for a while, you're coming in new, which is actually, I think, refreshing. It gives you a fresh opportunity to look at things in a new way. Let me just make a statement. I'm looking at the salary list here that Councilmember Gallagher was talking about, and what appears to be some inequities in pay structure. The definition of integrity is doing the right thing when no one's looking. All right, I have a little different opinion than you do. If I've got somebody who's been here and has not been performing and receiving public funds, performing a job they're not performing, I would not give them an opportunity to rectify the situation. So it's going to take some leadership on your part to go against a culture that has not necessarily fostered that type of atmosphere. You will have the backstop of the county's inspector general, and I can't assure you of anything that he'll go or she will go in and investigate, but I'm sure that position will be very interested to see how things turn around, not only in your department, but in other departments. We're also putting together some stringent whistleblower provisions, so those who feel as if they have not been able to come forward in the past will be able to come forward. I just give you this is information and a little bit of advice to demonstrate some leadership. I just have one question, and I asked this of our last candidate, and I'll ask this of every candidate. This is a great opportunity for reform, and I believe you see that. What are your plans to make this program a model program throughout the United States?
You're absolutely right. It's one of the reasons why I wanted this position is because it's a new opportunity. I mean, we're all writing the script right here, so we're all in something very, very important here. So whatever we lay down as the road, that's what we say in the road business and the transportation business. But the rest of the in the future, it'll be like how we put it together. The discussion about regionalism is a good discussion, but you have to make it tempting to the other communities to buy into what we're doing. Again, if we look at the services we provide, like the sanitary engineer services, county engineer, central services, we have to look at what we do, how cost effective we do things. Again, better, cheaper, faster. Get it to the point where things are so much better, so much faster, so much cheaper that we can sell our services to the local communities. And that's difficult to do sometimes because we're not a profit-based company, you know. But when we start doing those comparisons, and we can see that we can sell our services, and the sanitary engineer is actually they're doing just that with the services they provide in a lot of local communities. They have 33 communities that have already signed on as far as the sanitary engineer doing the maintenance of their sanitary sewers. We're getting ready to send out more letters to the communities that have not signed on yet to see if they're willing to sign on. It's been some cost savings for the local communities. They recognize by the numbers that are presented to them that they can save money. So, you know, if we as a county agency can say we can provide all of these services cost effectively to our communities, I think that says a lot, and I think that's people are going to look at us that, hey, how'd you do that?
Ms. Cowell.
The first one, the Public Works Director's scope of responsibility encompasses a broad range of departments and functions. Among them are engineering issues, Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District concerns, issues relating to the Planning Commission's development, sanitation, and solid waste. How will you attempt to coordinate the activities of these various departments regarding staffing priorities, reports, and projects?
The good thing about the new organization, you know, before the county engineer, the sanitary engineer, they were kind of silos out by themselves, and they didn't necessarily have to report to anybody. Now, with everything all under one umbrella, you can no longer have the silos. You can't have one division doing something all by itself. We had a lot of that at ODOT when I was there, and it really takes true leadership to say, get out of your silo and come over here and work with this. The interesting thing, and I'm not the only one who recognized this, but there's a lot of, in the public side, there's a lot of this is my job and I'm the only one who wants to do it. But when you get to the private side, you don't have that. And I recognized it right away when I went to the private side, and other people that I know that went to the private side, they shared the same experience with me, that on the private side, when somebody has a project, I was calling people in Michigan from Grand Rapids, and they're like, Bonnie, what do you need? I'll come down here and I'll help you. And they would drive from Grand Rapids and come down to Ohio because I had a signal that I couldn't figure out. So there was more camaraderie on the private side. When I got to ODOT District 12, they were doing pretty good not having their silos, but they still needed a little bit of help. They would still get into the territorial thing. But it really comes from leadership, and leadership saying, don't do that, let's work together. Mr. Fitzgerald is constantly saying, how can we share services? How can we, use people differently? We had the exact same conversation about the Planning Commission and solid waste, and even the animal shelter. The animal shelter is under central services. Is that the right place for it? Again, it's a new opportunity. We can rewrite the playbook. We have to ask all those questions. That's the first question out of the gate. Why are we doing this? Why is it like this? So, and it comes from the top, and you got to work it down, to the staff.
Second question, based upon your current administrative experience with budget and contracting, how will you address issues pertaining to accountability, transparency, and inclusion of minority and other groups with regard to specific projects under your and supervision to ensure inclusion, and at the same time, proper monitoring of the public purse?
I think the Interbelt project is a good example of what we did in District 12 as far as inclusion. The Interbelt project, first of all, was the largest single project ever sold in the state of Ohio. So at $287 million, it was an important job, and we wanted to use that job as a landmark of what the state of Ohio wanted to do as far as inclusion goes. We had very high expectations on our inclusion on the Interbelt job. And many people, contractors, told us that it would be impossible to meet those goals. That wasn't an answer for me. I always looked at the goals that we set as the starting point and not at the ending point. So many times we look at goals, percentages, and, when the contractor reaches that percentage, they stop looking. I don't look at it that way. You start at that point and you work on. At ODOT, particularly for the Interbelt Bridge, we hired a consultant that was familiar with the community, that was able to give ultimately it's the contractor's responsibility, but it was important to us that we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to get to the end of the project and they were going to say we can't meet our goal, that it started even before the project sold, and we tried to work a plan. Once the contractor was awarded the project, our consultant worked directly with the contractor. What's your plan? I actually sat in on a meeting with the contractor, and he handed us a plan, and it was a good marketing piece of material, but it really wasn't a playbook. And our consultant spent a lot of time working with the contractor to actually create a playbook for inclusion that, when this person walks into the office, how do you handle that person? That step-by-step procedure on how you would get people, how you could get people involved in the project. So I like to say that I have experience in that area, and it's important. One of the challenges that we had at ODOT, and I know the city of Cleveland likes to, they like to give preference to local contractors. Because you're using federal dollars, the FHWA wouldn't allow us to give preference to geographic locations. So we basically up the DBE percentage to help, and we're looking locally first, and even though we can't specifically say that person has to be local or that contractor has to be local, the consultant that we're using is familiar with the local contractors.
I have a third question, but I'll pass at this time.
Go ahead. I don't see anybody else jumping up and down, so go ahead.
Madam President?
Simon?
More? Do it.
What do yours?
Okay. NOACA, like you mentioned, is a vitally important institution whose mission is to create projects and coordinate regional services and activities that affect our municipalities and communities throughout Cuyahoga County. What types of projects and activities will you personally encourage in tandem with the role of this very important agency that will benefit specifically the housing, educational, transportation, social, and healthcare needs of the residents of our county?
NOACA is a good resource that I think people don't take advantage of enough. And as the director of ODOT District 12, when people would come with funding and they necessarily wouldn't be good fits for ODOT money, we would always send them to NOACA, because NOACA has the ability to fund in different areas for local projects. And I don't think it's utilized enough, and I think people need to be more aware of that. For the local communities, when they have a huge capital project, they're so expensive. They get a little gun shy a little bit because it's so much, and you need to come up with so much money, and you can't get it out of your your local budget. So you kind of need to hold their hand and go through the process, and this is what you need to do. And it's good to have a partner. And, you know, we talk about regionalism, and that's a good opportunity that, you know, you take these local communities and you help them along the process so that they can find the funding. And, you know, that's one of the things that I found where I was successful as a consultant, that as a consultant, if you're familiar with the funding opportunities and you can find a local community money for projects, they're your best friends, you know, so they let you design the project. So I think that's the role that we play with the county engineer's office, sanitary office.
Thank you, Ms. Simon.
Thank you very much. This is a little different from my colleague's question about the actual employees of the county under your authority. Do you think there's a need for more diversity with more women or more minorities that are currently employed?
You know, honestly, I have not gotten out to the areas. The people that I'm familiar with, that I've worked with through the county engineer's office, I would say yes, there needs to be more diversity from my experience, but I really need to take a look, not just in the county engineers, the sanitary and central services, just to see, you know, what the diversity is. One program that was very successful that I implemented at ODOT, it was the Apprentice Program, and it was specifically to bring women and minorities into non-traditional roles. And we would work with hard-hatted women, the Urban League. We would ask for candidates that passed their pre-apprentice program, and we would say, give us your two best candidates, and we're going to interview them, and we're going to bring them into ODOT as seasonal employees. We're going to train them to get their CDL, and it's a 90-day program. Hopefully they would get their CDL. Hopefully they would be good workers, and we would bring them on as permanent employees. But at the end of the day, if 90 days they got their CDL, if they decided they didn't want to work for ODOT, they still left with their CDL. So we worked with them. It was a great program. We ended up hiring, I think, a total of, in the 3 years, we ended up hiring 5. We would take 2 each year. 1 year we could only get 1 for some reason. But it was a successful program, and we have women and minorities that probably never would have had an opportunity to get their CDL, which really limited the jobs that they could apply for.
Thank you. Number 2 question is regarding the dog kennel. That's under Central Services. Are you familiar enough with that facility to know whether the dog licenses and fees are being enforced aggressively enough to help fund additional needs for the kennel?
One of I don't know personally, but my conversation that I had with the sheriff is that the sheriff's department, while they're patrolling, they can help us with help the county with enforcements of people who don't have dog license, to bring that up. He cited some percentage as far as the number of dogs versus the number of dogs that actually had licenses, and it's a pretty low percentage. So the goal would be to have more dogs licensed and bring more revenues in.
Madam President, this is a backup question to this number 2 question.
Dogs, keep going.
Okay, I can yield to probably more than this, but what's the chain of command with regard to that particular facility? How does that go from you down? Do you know?
Me to Jay Ross to the manager of the animal shelter. And again, the sheriff and I are having discussions about where that should fit, that it might be a better fit under the sheriff. So that might be changed in the future. And the discussion would be, how do we make that happen? I'm thinking we would have to go to council to make that happen, those adjustments.
I think there's a few of us on this council that would have particular interest in that restructuring to enable that facility to function more effectively. So that would like to come through one of our committees, safety, colleague Gallagher.
Okay.
Thank you. And the last question, with regard to, do we have what's Dyke 14? Is that, I see that Whiskey Island is county property, is Dike 14 under the auspices of the Port Authority and/or county? Do you know how that's actually
Don't, I'm
situated?
sorry.
Okay, so maybe
But
we
I
can.
can find out for you.
Thank you.
14 or 13?
I think it's all port, but Dike 14. I think it's all, I think the jurisdiction
By the
is
port.
the port.
Okay.
Yeah, just to follow, I have some other questions, but I just want to follow up on the dog license. I know they said that there were a fairly low number of people in relation to the number of dogs exist that have licenses, and the money from the licenses then go into the kennel, so it helps the dog.
Right.
Do you have any idea of having any kind of program to promote people to buying dog licenses? I'm sure you'll probably get a lot of volunteers and people, because, I mean, it would help other dogs.
They do have, the animal shelter does have a, and I'll use this term very loosely, marketing program, for adoptions and for, to encourage people to buy license. Again, I'm not that familiar with it. The revenues that they do bring in, that's what keeps the animal shelter running. So I don't believe that there's very much general fund that goes towards the animal shelter.
Okay, I believe that Simon and myself, Mr. Gallagher, would be interested in anything promoting that. And I'll reserve my other questions for Mr. Miller and then Mr. Brady, and I'll reserve my other questions.
Madam President, Ms. Tewan, under the new system of government that we have, there's going to be two parts to the contracting procedure, which is the procedures that you go through before legislation is submitted to council, and then there's the part that happens after it gets to council, which we're currently working on. And my question is whether there are any changes in the process for handling contracts before they're submitted to council that would be different than the current procedures in place that you would recommend or plan to implement?
Again, I think this is something that we all have to work at together. That because we're blazing a new trail, we should get it right. And it's a combination of working with council and the executive staff to try to find the right balance between how many times we come to council to ask for your permission to pursue a project versus taking a whole year of coming to council over and over again. So I'm excited in the fact that we can write the book and write the procedure, but I definitely believe there do need to be changes. I think we need to expedite the process. You're familiar with the state legislator and at ODOT, we didn't come to the state legislators, can we hire this consultant for this project? The state legislators approved the transportation budget, and then all the specific decisions as far as spending money was done with the controlling board. That might be something that we look at so that your valuable time here at council is not wasted. With one project coming 8 different times asking for permission to move forward with the project.
Madam President, I would just comment on that I think generally I would support having most things come to council just once, and I think we're going to try to work in that direction. Madam President, Ms. Tewan, the engineering department, the sanitary engineering department, and central services would seem to cover a lot of fertile ground for finding ways where the county can save money. And my question is whether you have any specific proposals at this point, because we really need to find whatever we can find.
I don't have specific proposals, but I do have directions that I want to go. The first and the obvious is the facilities that the county owns. There's many facilities. I was amazed at all the facilities that we owned, that we lease, that is something that, as part of the county STAT program, a subset of that is the executive on loan. I've asked Jennifer Schofield, who's kind of spearheading the county STAT, to get me an executive that's familiar with property management, analysis of properties, so that we can get started. I mean, I'm chomping at the bit. I want to start tomorrow. After this is all behind me, I want to start on that and really look at our facilities. There's been a couple of studies that were done. I don't want to waste money, doing a study that was already done, but I want to feel comfortable that, the study that was done, was it done correctly? Do we need to expand from that? So that's an obvious savings. I think that's a very big, where we can spend or save a lot of money in that area. Another good example, and these are things like when I first started going through all the things that Central Services does, the engineer's office, is Central Services has double digits of employees in the mailroom, basically carrying mail from one location to another. Our contract that we just approved for a new printing service can actually minimize the number of people in the mailroom. If we get into the current technology where we scan things, we send them off electronically, we become more green. Don't print things out. We're not spending money on cartridges. It's really amazing to me how expensive it is for printers, and we have to have a plan in place to consolidate printers, work with IT and the print shop to see where we can save money. But my experience with ODOT is you can't have everybody have their own personal printers on their desk because they're too expensive. I mean, it's just a huge expense. You have to go to the network printers. You have to go with scanning. Get away from the fax machines because you can have fax numbers, right through your computer. There's a lot of opportunities there for technology that can save us a lot of money. But if you look at something like that, reduce your cost in copiers and printers, and then minimize your personnel in the mailroom, you get a 2-for-1. So there's a lot of opportunities like that.
Madam President, I haven't asked any off-the-wall questions all day, and I think I should come up with one.
Great. Thanks for saving it for
Mr.
me.
Spector's getting his pen out ready over there.
My final question is about your experience with the Euclid Corridor project. And my personal opinion is that that whole street is just way over-programmed, and that I never drive it when I don't have to, and when I do, I never can go 2 blocks without ending up in the wrong lane, and I would just appreciate your comment on that. It goes to the question of the design of projects. I think that we can. Sometimes there can be too much government, too much programming, too much restriction, and you end up with something that just isn't very flexible and user-friendly.
The challenge as a transportation engineer is to accommodate all forms of transportation. There's some people who say that the roads are just for cars. There's other people that say we need to accommodate transit, we need to accommodate bicycles, pedestrians. The world's becoming more ped-friendly, bike-friendly, and it becomes a challenge as far as that balancing act. FHWA has a process in place that whenever there's federal dollars being spent, that you have to look at all the different forms of transportation and study them to see if they're reasonable. One of the challenges we had on the Interbelt Bridge that's being constructed right now is the argument, and I'm sure you guys are all familiar with it, whether we should put a bike path or pedestrian access on the Interbelt Bridge. I had people that say those people are crazy that want to drive a bike there, and I had other people that says, why wouldn't you give us bicycle access on it? So, I mean, it's one extreme or another. So the balance is, how do you take taxpayers' monies and spend them wisely to not necessarily accommodate all people, but the most people? And, you know, in your opinion, as far as the Euclid corridor project, you know, they spent too much money on the bike part, or on the transit part, you know, where you want more roadway part of it. So maybe that study wasn't done correctly in your mind, but there was federal agency, there were studies that were done that, you know, this was the way to go in that particular situation.
Madam President, I certainly want to see all the different modalities in use, but somehow it seems like the coordination could have been better, but that's maybe not, but that's what it seems to me. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Mr. Brady?
Thank you, Council President. I want to commend my colleague on saying what everybody in town thinks but is afraid to say. There's nobody driving on it. It's got to tell you something, right?
I must be the only one driving on it, but I drive on it because I like to admire my work.
Under central services, and I can see you're very enthusiastic to take over your new responsibilities. I appreciate that. Under central services, there's fleet management, and my colleague mentioned looking for places to save money. I've never seen a government bureaucracy that didn't have more vehicles than it needed, and without having done any study, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case with the county as well. So I just want to point that out, the obvious, that in many cases these vehicles are perks for employees. It's well known, and it's gone on for many, many, many years, but I think it's about time we took a look at it, and this seems to be the appropriate time.
Well, that's interesting you should say that, because when I became the District 12 Deputy Director, one of the things that I specifically looked at was, A, the take-home privileges for state vehicles and where vehicles were being parked by the employees. We had a lot of construction personnel that were parking their vehicles at construction projects. We had personnel that lived on the east side, and they had a project on the west side, and they would take their state vehicle and they would park it on the east side where they lived. It was at a construction project because the rule was you had to park your vehicle at a state facility or project. So, you know, they were kind of by the rule, but they were stretching it. So when I came in, I said, no, the vehicle stays on the project that you're working on. You can't drive it across the county. And we got into a little bit of trouble because it was a District 12 policy and it wasn't for the rest of the state. And, you know, my guys were like, how come District 4 doesn't have to do it? And I said, because, you know, you work in District 12, not in District 4. At the end of the day, the Director Beasley at that time in Columbus, he liked the idea so much, and the numbers were saving us money just by people not driving back and forth, that the district policy, they called it the Bonnie policy, became the statewide policy, that, you know, the vehicles stayed on the site. They, you know, you couldn't drive them anywhere close to your home, so we were very specific. And our managers and our safety people actually monitored where some of those vehicles were parked. sometimes the construction projects, they ended up being, in old houses or something like that that the contractor would get, and they would turn them into a project trailer. So, somebody would see a state or two state vehicles parked at this old house over, all the time, and they'd be calling up complaining, well, how come these state vehicles are parked there all the time? Well, we ended up having to get signs that said ODOT project trailer and putting them in obvious spaces so people would know that it was legitimate places where these people were being parked. So we monitored it, just to make sure that people weren't bucking the system, and we saved a lot of money. We more not a necessity because we couldn't afford to buy a lot of vehicles. We actually looked at the cost of paying our employees mileage as opposed to giving them a vehicle. And if somebody drives from, like our office was in Garfield Heights, if I would drive to downtown for a meeting, I wouldn't take a state vehicle. I'd take my own vehicle because I didn't want to mess around with the pool and everything. I never turned in mileage because it was more of a pain in the butt than getting the money back. So I think we showed some cost savings there just because people didn't turn in the mileage, just for the short little trips here and there. So I'm very aware of what you're saying, and I understand that, and I have experience in that, and I'm not afraid to toe the line on that.
Well, I appreciate that, and it seems like a simple issue, but there's, as you know, because you've experienced it, there's nothing more tenacious than government employees holding onto their vehicles, no matter how much you try to pry their hands off the steering wheel. Something I'm a little confused about, maybe you can straighten me out, or maybe somebody else can. The purview, how does the Whiskey Island property work its way into your purview? Whiskey Island happens to be in my district. Nobody lives there, but it's an odd piece of property, but it is used a lot, and there are plans for it. So I'm trying to find out what I can about it. And you had indicated that you might not know, but
yeah,
exactly how does that?
It falls under the facilities end of it, which again, that will be part of the whole analysis that we look at if that's appropriate for the
Madam Chairman, the reason I bring it up is just because there seems to be some ongoing anticipation about exactly how it's going to be used. And I've been aware of it over the years because as a Cleveland City Councilman, we were taken down there many, many years ago when they were looking at building, a marina down there in the first place, and then it became some parkland, and there's a lot of activity down there in the summertime now that there didn't used to be. And there's some talk about, well, not just talk, but pretty focused plans on a towpath that would somehow, a bridge would be built over to the island. I'm a little skeptical about that, not as an idea not as a bad idea, but as maybe an impractical kind of an idea. And then there are some other issues that go along with the towpath anyway. But so for these reasons, this particular councilman, Dan Brady, District 3, is would like to stay in touch with you about that project. So at least I'm informed about what's happening there. And thank you very much.
Ms. Simon?
Madam President, with regard to Whiskey Island, perhaps that's something we can funnel through the Environmental and Sustainability Committee. Would that work for you? Because I have an avid interest in that as well. Okay. Julian Rogers is chair of our Environmental Committee.
Just in talking about facilities, Ms. T1, how are you going to connect with the council? This whole control of facilities is one of the items given to the council under the charter in terms of purchasing and leases and all that. So how are you going to make sure that we are sufficiently advised? What liaison processes you're going to set up to make sure that this information gets to the council? Because as we told the sheriff this morning, you can't kind of come in the day that legislation or the day legislation is proposed without us having some knowledge about that. And also as it regards in that same area, since you're coming up with a whole new structure here, you'll be creating departments the same way? How are you going to keep us in the loop in terms of, because we have to approve all of those departments. So you can't just come and say we can create that without telling us and having some input from the proper committee.
Well, I think it's very important to become an active member with the subcommittees, not a member, but participation with the subcommittees to, at that point, work with council and Mr. Fitzgerald in conjunction as far as some of the changes that we want to make and how we want to approach projects and keep you informed. But I envision us spending a lot of time together in the subcommittees that you have. You know, Mr. Councilman Jones and I, we already talked about the Public Works, and I mean, we're going to be best friends because we're going to see each other all the time. So that's how I envision it. Is we need to be involved, and whether it's not myself, somebody, you know, somebody with more expertise.
All right, Mr. Jones.
Bonnie, thank you for being here. You've answered many questions already and answered many of mine that my colleagues have asked. So I have one question. The County Planning Commission, does that fall under your?
No.
Does not?
No. The discussion is getting it physically close to the Economic Development Department. It kind of goes hand in hand. We really need to look at all the things that the Planning Commission does. Solid waste, somebody brought that up. I think, yeah. That seems to make more sense to be under the Public Works. So I think we really need to look at the Planning Commission and all the things that they do. You know, they do a lot of work with OPWC, Public Works money. You know, does that person need to be under the Planning Commission, or do they need to be under the engineers? So I think that's one of the departments that there needs to be more of an analysis of, to figure out, you know, what they're doing and how they're doing, you know, what each person is doing and where it best fits, so that we can knock down those silos.
And Bonnie, as you know, one of the added functions to the county is a desire of the residents of this county to make this county more economic competitiveness. I read in the paper a few days ago an article where President Obama looked at Public Works and said he'd like to see it seen as an investment. I don't know if you saw that. Yeah. What are your thoughts and your vision? Do you see Public Works as more than just maybe short-term construction jobs, but as some type of economic engine? Or?
Well, you know, the fact that the country spent stimulus dollars on infrastructure, I think that's a huge message. I'm trying to remember statewide the dollars. I think we were close to $1 billion of federal stimulus money that came into the state of Ohio. District 12 had $85 million. No, we had $85 million in on the Interbelt project. We had close to $122 million. Sorry, district wide of stimulus money. Just like you said, the first advantage is the additional construction jobs. You know, but the long-term impacts is that we have a failing infrastructure. And it's, you know, particularly in the Rust Belt, if you want to call it, with the bad weather conditions that we have, the age of our system. I mean, we have an infrastructure that's crumbling. And you can see when there's potholes, you can see when there's bridges that are falling apart, but the hidden problems are the water lines, the gas lines, the sewer lines that we can't see, that nobody really thinks about. I'm sure you guys all do because you're familiar with this, but I don't think the common person really thinks about, you know, that the water line is deteriorating right underneath their road, you know, and when we spend money on infrastructure, in the long term, it's a good investment, because we know that when we build roads, infrastructures, that it opens the availability up to development. So that if you don't have roads and you don't have water and sewers in an area, you have a hard time developing that area. The thing about Cuyahoga County is we have a very good infrastructure already built, but it's deteriorating. So we need to repair that, and we need to redevelop the areas through improved infrastructure. So if we can go into an area that, and I'm going to use the Opportunity Corridor as a good example. It's a very depressed area. At one point, there were a lot of residents living there, but now you go there and you know, you can go blocks without seeing anybody. The Opportunity Corridor is a good opportunity that will connect the 55th to the University Circle, to take it through land that is not fully developed, that is you know, beyond its useful life. Put in new infrastructure and give businesses an opportunity to build in that area. So the question is, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you build the road first and then the development comes, or does the development come and then you build the road and the infrastructure? But with Opportunity Corridor, they're really looking at how is this property going to develop along that corridor. First goal is to get people to University Circle, but then there's obviously going to be as University Circle builds out, they're going to build along the Opportunity Corridor. And ODOT worked very closely with the city of Cleveland, with the local communities, the CDCs, to make sure that we wouldn't adversely impact the neighborhoods, because we understand that transportation isn't just about businesses, it's about people too, and making sure that there's neighborhoods that thrive in that area.
I
left you
I won't
speechless.
follow up. Yeah, I live in the area, and I'm hopeful for the economic development. I'll leave it at that. Little off-ball question. I'm a funeral director, so I'm somewhat sensitive, and my antenna goes up when at different causes of death. Dead Man's Curve. Are there any plans for it, or is it even county property? I don't even know. But what can you tell me about Dead Man's Curve and any intentions for that?
You mean the Interbelt curve?
The Interbelt Curve, right.
Sharon said the dead person's curve.
This is my ODOT hat and not my county hat. But the study that was done 10 years ago, ODOT recognized the fact that the Central Viaduct Bridge needed to be replaced. So they went to the feds. The feds said you have to do a study for the bridge to be replaced. The feds said, while you're looking at this problem, you have the highest accident area in the state of Ohio is actually not the Interbelt Curve, but it's actually the trench area by Carnegie and Prospect. That's the highest accident area in the state of Ohio. They said if you want money for this, you got to study the whole corridor and make fixes to the whole corridor. So for 10 years, ODOT has been working on the study for the environmental document for how we can make improvements along the whole corridor, and that includes the Interbelt Curve, the trench area, the interchange between 77, where 77 ends into 90, and then the bridge also. So that whole corridor was studied. We have a plan as far as how we want to approach that. Not we, because it's them now, not we. ODOT has a plan, but the phasing is such is that they're building the first bridge now. There's going to be twin bridges. They're building the first bridge now. It's under contract. That will eventually carry the westbound traffic or southbound traffic, however you look at it. The second phase is building the second bridge. The third phase will be they'll jump to the 77 interchange, 90 interchange. They'll make improvements there. And then the fourth phase will be the flattening of the curve on the Interbelt. So and it's very dependent on funding. And since the federal government is still working on their transportation bill, that's kind of up in the air as far as how much money we're going to have coming to the state. But if you assume we have the same spending that we have in previous years, they anticipate that the Interbelt curve, I believe, will be in 2000. Second bridge will be in 13, 16.
Bonnie, did you make sure I understood you correctly? Did you describe the Carnegie, I'm going to say the Carnegie off-ramp area as an area that was a high accident area?
Yeah, we call that area the trench area, which basically goes from like Lakeside to kind of around the curve there, like to 22nd. That area right in there is the highest accident rate in the state of Ohio.
The Carnegie off-ramp is in my district, and many of those businesses, as I'm sure you're probably fully aware, are up in arms at the thought of losing that off-ramp. That is an example of economic development. When that ramp comes in, if they take it away, all of those businesses suffer loss. It could just close up.
Actually, 2 days before I left ODOT, we had a meeting with Midtown, who's been the driving force as far as keeping the Carnegie ramp. During our whole environmental study, we did do an economic study that showed by removing that ramp, there wouldn't be any economic disadvantage to that area. Obviously, Midtown didn't agree with us. They filed a lawsuit against ODOT in trying to, what's the word I'm looking for, mediate a solution to the problem. We agreed with Midtown that ODOT would do a couple of economic studies in that area. First, we're going to look at the economic study right now, this day and time, basically take a snapshot in time of how the economy is doing right now with the Carnegie ramp in place. We agreed to do a series of 3 economic studies, different options with the ramp, without the ramp, 10 years from now or 20 years from now when we actually get to that point. That portion of the Interbelt project is so far out, there's a lot of things that could change between now and then. And we recognize that, and the federal government actually requires us to reevaluate what was in the environmental document before we actually start constructing things. So, we made the commitment that we would go in, we would restudy. We're going to make Midtown a part of the process so that they feel comfortable with what is going into the study, so that, they can't say, well, we don't agree with it, and that was the mistake that they made before. And hopefully, by them being a part of the process, we can all come up with something we can agree on.
All right, Mr. Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the Director, one of the things that we realized in the City of Parma in the last couple of years is our link with the sanitary engineer. And probably like most inner-rig suburbs, when you hit the hot button of the underground that people can't see, we're under a situation where every 100-year storm, which happened every couple of years, we're actually able to, to plot how many houses backed up and so on and so forth. And our sewer department was chasing problems, not fixing anything. The sanitary engineer has done a tremendous job with the City of Parma. Great coordination with our engineer, Paul Dykman, and our service director. And I believe there's 20-some cities that the Cuyahoga County sanitary engineer works with. And this is really when we talk about regionalization and making the whole area corroborate with one another, cities corroborating with one another. This is definitely a great success story. And, I'm glad in hearing that you evaluate these programs. I'm just wondering if it seems like the county over the recent years have been divesting themselves of doing things, road work in different municipalities and so on. But, the experience with the sanitary engineers situation is they're specialized, they're professional, they've got the equipment. I'm just wondering if there's the potential, as long as we could evaluate and charge back correctly, the cities can do more with less in cooperation with the county, just not in sanitary engineering, but in roads and so on. Do you care to comment about that?
Actually, we already talked a little bit about that, Bob Kleibert and I. One program that he wants to start, and this is really starting at the entry level, is pavement striping. Those little white lines that we don't think about until it's raining and it's at night and we can't see what lane we're in. There's a definite economy to scale when it comes to pavement striping, because the guy riding the truck, he can make money when he just drives, and he doesn't want to have to stop and start. And if you're doing one community, one roadway in one community, it gets very expensive to mobilize just for that. Bob was going to pursue getting a pavement marking contract, talking to local communities, seeing if they would like to buy into it, that they would pay the cost of the unit price. He would administer the project for a striping job. It's very minimal. But that's something small, but that's a perfect example of how economy of scale, you can save some money. And you can just go it and start striping. There's other smaller things like catch basin repairs that all communities do. But if you hire a contractor to do some of that stuff, they're going to get in and out of there real quick. And it doesn't matter if, you're in just one community, you can hit this road and just keep on going down the road, and it doesn't matter if it's what community it's in. You can make the repairs. So it's the thought's already there, and I think it's a good idea. The sanitary engineer started it. You're exactly right. This kind of ties back to Mr. Greenspan's question as far as how can you make something world class. If you can sell your product and you can sell it for so much cheaper and everybody's buying into it, that's a good thing for the general maintenance. But becoming more proactive so that you're not just handling the complaints, but you're actually getting in and you're lining those sewers, you're making the repairs before they actually become a problem. And it's easier to do when you're looking at a whole system rather than just looking at little pieces, parts. So that's another advantage to looking at a bigger pie, is it allows you to be more proactive. And over and over again, you end up saving money on your infrastructure if you maintain it. And it's dimes on the dollar of maintenance money, but it comes down to the local communities can't afford to maintain their system, so they just let it deteriorate to the point where it gets so bad now they have to spend a lot of money. So the county should be the advocate to, for more preventative maintenance, so we can spend, pennies on the dollar to maintain our system.
Mr. Greenspan? Do you have another question?
No, I'm very impressed with her answer. Not only mine, but all the answers today. Thank you.
Mr. Greenspan?
Thank you, Madam President. A couple real quick, well, who knows if they're quick or not, depending on the response.
Am I rambling? Sorry.
No. My question may be 3 words, but the response may be volumes. You keep mentioning regionalism, and I'm just curious. We're talking about regional. Are you talking about regional collaboration, working with the other director of regional collaboration for voluntary collaboration, or would you seek some form of legislation to compel municipalities to collaborate?
Well, my perspective is if I can do it better, cheaper, faster, and then I present that to them, I think they'd have a hard time saying no. So rather than, strong arm them into it, I'll just present the numbers to them and let them decide for themselves.
Thank you. So you're talking voluntary collaboration. Okay, great. Thank you. Another question has to do with the hiring. Is it your expectation that you will be free to hire and fire whomever you want in the engineer and sanitation departments, or do you expect? I bring up Mr. Clyburg's situation. The Plain Deal reported that Mr. Fitzgerald's unsure or unclear if he's going to hire him. Is that his decision or your decision?
I think it's going to be our decision that we're going to work together. He basically told me that I need to go in and not just in the county engineer's office, but all 3 divisions that I'm over and look at what's going on and report back to him and tell him the good things that they're doing, tell him the bad things that we're doing, and how we want to address those situations.
Will the ultimate decision be yours or both of yours? And what if you disagree?
It'll be both of ours. I will present the facts to him. I'm sure he'll ask me for my opinion, and then we'll decide together.
So that opens up a whole nother can of. So if you're being hired to manage this division of the company, and you don't have free autonomy to make decisions as it relates to hiring practices, how much autonomy will you have as it relates to prioritizing projects and programs?
And I think that particular situation is a different situation. It's a hot topic that I don't think that I would make that decision in a tunnel all by myself. I think I have enough experience in all these areas that I can present my recommendations to Mr. Fitzgerald. Hopefully he'll have enough confidence in me to make those decisions.
Okay.
We're still trying to figure out each other ourselves. I've known him for a whole week, so.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out who the boss is.
Yeah.
Is it you or is it Mr. Fitzgerald in this arena? That's my question, and maybe it should be taken up with the executive. The last question I have has to do with the regional sewer district and this $3 billion project that was just voted upon, which I think has far-reaching negative implications on economic development. But the county appoints 3 members to the sewer district board. Is it your expectation that your position might be one of those 3 appointees to represent the county on that board?
I would think so, but we haven't had a conversation specifically on who those people should be. So I need to get back to you on that.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
Madam President, good night.
Jones?
Bonnie, in the time between our November election and taking office in January, we had transition classes and to bring us up to speed. And one of the topics that was brought to us was the condition of Lake Erie and the algae bloom that pollutes the lake. And there was an inference that part of it was the lifestyle of the community in rural areas and urban areas, those pesticides flowing into the sewer systems, and that this was in part cause for our lake pollution. Do you agree with this assessment? And if so, what comments do you have on it?
Honestly, I don't have any comments. I don't know enough about it to make a comment on it.
Fair enough.
I just kind of a concern of mine is, and Mr. Gallagher asked about it before, you have something like $1.9 million in unclassified staff, and for the engineer, and another $294,000 in salaries for the unclassified for the sanitary engineer, and then we have like 5 pages of employees over here with a wide range of salaries. And then, of course, we're going to have Mr. Miller is going to be in charge of our budget committee. You're going to be bringing back a plan with salaries to us, for us to approve. So what's the time frame in terms of having a comprehensive plan to review these employees? Mr. Sheriff Reed was here this morning. He indicated a reduction in staff, because of some planning and business decisions he made relative to the sheriff's office. Do you have that kind of plan in mind? I mean, I know you've just been here a week, so we can't ask a lot.
Ideally, I'd like to get everything done tomorrow. So we could get in and we can start, making improvements. Again, to give everybody a fair opportunity, I don't want to make harsh decisions. I don't know if it's really fair to say that I'm going to in 2 weeks I'm going to have a decision that, that who should have a reduction in pay and who should become classified or unclassified or however we work it. But there does need to be a comprehensive look at it. Personnel issues, you need to get everybody in the right spot to start doing the right thing. So that's obviously the first step in where we need to go to start making improvements. So, that's going to be on the top of the list.
And just to follow up on Mr.
Actually, everything's on the top of the list.
Well, Mr. Clyburn's salary, then with the salary he has now, he's paid as the county engineer and as the sanitary engineer. Is that set by? I'm not sure. Is that set by statute or what? The salary that he makes now. So you would be in a position to review that based on your decision and your business plan. Okay.
Madam President, I'm sorry. I have a question, not a general comment, not necessarily to Ms. Teeuwen. In general, the purpose of these confirmation hearings is to hear evidence and testimony. A motion is made for us to bring it before council for a final vote. A decision today to bring it before council, and this has nothing to do with this, this is a general statement, does not mean that candidate will be confirmed.
That's correct. It would be proposed to council, and we can make our decision between now and the next meeting, which will be February 8th.
The reason I bring this up, the Plain Dealer is reporting that we are set to confirm Sheriff Reed, and no vote has been made to do that. So I just want to make it clear the purpose of this hearing is to decide to move forward or send it to committee. That is it, not a vote of affirmation.
Right. This is a committee of the whole, and it's sending it out of committee. You're correct. You're exactly correct, Mr. Greenspan.
Thank you.
Madam President,
Mr. Miller.
on that point with regard to Sheriff Reed, while we did not confirm anything today, the committee did make a positive recommendation. I think it's more than just sending it to the full council. We sent it to the full council with our positive recommendation, and since this is the committee of the whole and everybody was here and almost everybody voted on it, it's a pretty positive indicator. But at the same time, we're not. It's not a commitment that we would necessarily vote the same way when it comes to the full council.
Yeah, Madam President, to that end, I may vote, this is hypothetical, I may vote to move it to council, but may not support that candidate. So just because it's 11-0 doesn't mean that the vote at the end will be 11-0. It's just a motion to bring it before council for vote. I just want to be clear. We're in agreement. I just want to make sure that there's no misunderstanding.
Mr. Brady.
Yes, my flying is of a different nature. I really like what I'm hearing from the nominee, and look forward to voting for her recommendation to the full council. But I'm to my colleagues again. I'm wondering how we might go forward and determine how we handle what could be a problem with the charter in terms of the Department of Central Services being merged with your responsibilities. And if we would agree with that merger, if we do agree with that merger, how we go about putting it on at least the same track as the appointment, it would seem that it shouldn't be something we do after the appointment, and if not, then how do we do it before the appointment? Do we have to do it? I'm not sure exactly. I know that there's a question about how the charter reads on this matter, and the fact that the council creates departments, and whether this has and whether what we do is going to be properly done in the order that it needs to be done. And I don't. So I'm looking for guidance on this.
Yes, Mr. Gallagher.
Madam Chair, Mr. Brady, I think what we probably should do is maybe have our president meet with Mr. Fitzgerald, because as it stands, without our consent, the way it's now situated doesn't really even exist. So, you know, if the candidate is comfortable with the way that it's been framed and we agree, then we could move forward. But I agree we should do this before the confirmation vote. Or simultaneously, but it'd probably be better if we knew ahead of time. Going to Mr. Greenspan's question on Mr. Kleiber, and I consider myself a friend of Bob. I would be my vote to confirm this candidate would be swayed in the negative if Mr. Kleiber were selected. Knowing what I know, knowing what I've read, knowing what's happened to that office, the fact that he was on gambling junkets with people that are going to prison, the hires that were made with the lack of experience or education that continue to, as far as I know today, that would definitely sway where I'm at. I would respectfully ask that you make a decision on that with Mr. Fitzgerald. Knowing that Mr. Fitzgerald's somewhat on a fence, sounds to me like you're on a fence. We need to get off that fence, because this is going to be a very big decision. I don't think it's a hard decision. It would be for me, considering my personal understanding of Bob, knowing Bob, but I have to look at what's happened. And what's happened is going to affect you and your ability to lead this division down the road.
And just, we have asked for a public comment today, and no one chose to come, but at our regularly scheduled meetings, we allow for public comment for any item that is on the agenda. So theoretically, we could have people, the public, come in and they comment relative to your appointment, Mr. Chef Reed or anyone, and which again might sway someone. You know, I don't know. So I think you made a good point that this is only a recommendation, that we do have an opportunity. We could theoretically get additional information between now. We're not like a jury that's limited to the information that we got today. We could have additional information come to us between now and the vote for confirmation.
Madam President?
Yes.
I'd also like to add, the charter says we have 30 days from date of notification. Once again, I'm looking at you, but I'm not directly saying. We have 30 days from date of notification. If there's something brought to our attention, we very well may, either today or at our meeting on the 8th, refer this to committee. If we go beyond that 30 days and we don't act, then the position becomes confirmed. What we would have to do is deny the request and then have a resubmission. That would be, as the charter reads, the proper protocol. Because if we don't act, it's automatic. If we act and decline, request resubmission, then the 30-day clock starts all over again. So if there are questions that come up regarding any candidate, it's just a general statement, it gives us the opportunity to refer to committee or to hold additional hearings.
And you know, with regard to Sheriff Reed, we had the date of January 18th as the date of his official, the day that I got the letter making the official request for confirmation. I don't know that I know the date. We probably have it. I just don't know that date for Ms. T-Wen.
Madam President, so with that, using that as an example, if we were uncomfortable with Sheriff Reed, or I'm sorry, we wanted more information, we would not have an opportunity unless we called the special meeting of council to confirm, because the next meeting would be the 20th, 2 days after the 30-day window. So at that meeting, we would either refer to committee, come back in the special meeting for the confirmation, or decline and request a resubmission. Kirk?
I believe that sounds correct to me.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, do we have anything further on Ms. T1 today? All right, do we have a recommendation on behalf of the committee?
Madam President, I recommend, I make a motion that we, I make a motion that we confirm, not confirm, recommend for confirmation, Ms. Bonnie T. Wynn.
Madam Chair, I'd like to second that recommendation to the council.
All right, so it's been moved by Mr. Jones and seconded by Mr. Germana. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Madam.
Yes, Mr. Miller.
Madam President, I just want to say that I am prepared to vote yes on this recommendation. However, I strongly share my colleague, Mr. Jones's concerns about Lake Erie, and I would ask that you look into that matter and see what we can do to have a positive impact on that situation. Thank you.
President,
Yes.
one further comment before we take a vote on this. And this is at the discretion of the chair, at the meeting, at our next meeting on the 8th, when this and Sheriff Reed's motion is heard before council, would the chair provide the candidates with an opportunity? There are a number of questions to speak. There are a number of questions that we've asked them to provide answers to, that they maybe do that before the confirmation vote.
You know, we have a work session this coming Tuesday, and it's the full council. So if they're available on that day, next Tuesday at 4, we're certainly here, and I think we could add that to the agenda.
That would be fair. I just want to make sure the candidates have an opportunity to respond to the entire committee on questions that they've yet to provide answers that they needed to research.
And we've been fairly loose in our rule in terms of public comment. I mean, if someone comes in for our work session and has public comment, I don't think there's any problem with, allowing for public comment. All right. Yes, Mr. Miller.
On that point, a work session is a form of a committee meeting, and there should actually be public comment at all committee meetings, so it's certainly appropriate.
All right, if there's nothing further, Madam Clerk, will you call the roll on the motion for recommendation to the council?
Approving the motion, Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Germana?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Yes. Ms. Conwell?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Conley? Yes. And Ms. Simon?
Yes.
Let the record reflect that Mr. Schron and Mr. Rogers is absent at this time.
All right, is there any other business to come before the committee of the whole this afternoon? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. All right, stand adjourned. Thank you.